The desert wind had begun to cut, like a blade when Thomas Hale noticed the lone figure moving along the Apache trail. At first he thought it was a trick of heat and dust, but as he rode closer, he saw it was a woman walking with slow, determined steps. Her black shawl was pulled tight around her shoulders, its edges frayed by sand and sun. She carried no rifle, no pack, no sign of protection, only grief that seemed to weigh heavier than the miles behind her. Out here, leaving someone to walk alone was a death sentence. Thomas reined in, his horse snorting softly, and called out to her. She turned without fear, her face calm but hollow, eyes dark with loss rather than panic. In careful English, she told him her husband had died and that she must return to her people. Her voice never trembled, but the words carried the finality of a life already broken and reshaped by sorrow. Thomas hesitated. He knew the Apache had laws older than the land deeds men like him carried, rules shaped by survival rather than paper. Still, the sun was sinking and the night would be cruel. He offered his canteen, then swung down and helped her onto the saddle behind him. She mounted with quiet dignity, keeping her distance, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if she feared looking back might undo her resolve. They rode in silence, the only sound the creak of leather and the steady rhythm of hooves. Thomas felt the weight of her presence without truly knowing her, aware that this simple act of kindness might carry consequences he didn't yet understand. When they reached the edge of the reservation, the light was fading fast, staining the sky red like old blood. An elderly Apache man stepped from the brush as if he had been waiting all along. His eyes moved from Thomas to the woman, then back again. He spoke to her in their language, his tone sharp but controlled. The woman's shoulders stiffened, and when she answered, her voice was low and resigned. The old man turned to Thomas and explained the law without anger, as if stating a fact of nature. By giving the widow a ride, by placing her upon his horse, Thomas had accepted responsibility for her protection and her future. By Apache law, he had become the man she must marry. Thomas laughed once, sure it had to be a misunderstanding. The old man did not smile. The woman finally met Thomas's eyes. There was no accusation in her gaze, no hope either, only acceptance. And in that moment, Thomas understood that a single act of mercy had just bound his life to hers in ways neither of them had chosen, yet neither could escape. By the next morning, Thomas realized the old man's words had not been a warning, but a declaration. Apache riders appeared at dawn, quiet and watchful, their presence calm yet unbreakable. No one raised a weapon. No one needed to. The law had already been spoken, and among them, law was not something to be debated. It was something to be honored. Thomas tried anyway. He spoke of his ranch, the dry acres he struggled to keep alive, the life he had built alone after burying his family. He explained that his kindness had not been an agreement, that he had never meant to claim a woman or bind her future to his own. The elders listened without interruption, their faces lined by years of survival. When he finished, they repeated the law as if he had said nothing at all. A widow must not be left unprotected. A man who placed her upon his horse accepted her fate as his responsibility. The woman, Nalin, stood apart while they spoke. When she finally stepped forward, her voice was steady, almost distant. She told them she had not asked for this bond, that she had only accepted help because death waited behind her. Her words earned quiet nods, but nothing changed. The law did not care for intention, it cared only for balance. They began traveling together because there was no other choice. Thomas rode ahead or behind, careful not to touch her unless necessary. Each mile felt heavier than the last, burdened by unspoken tension. He noticed how she read the land instinctively, how she warned him of dry water, holes and shifting ground before. He saw the signs himself. In return, he shared his food, his fire, his silence. Suspicion followed them wherever they went. White settlers watched with narrowed eyes, whispering as they passed. Apache warriors observed from a distance, measuring Thomas's every movement, every choice. He understood then that he was being tested, not as a husband, but as a man. At night, by the fire, they finally spoke without witnesses. Nalin told him of her husband, killed weeks earlier during a raid, and of the emptiness left behind. Thomas spoke of his ranch and the ghosts that lingered there, of a life built on stubborn survival rather than hope. Marriage to my people is duty before love, Nalin said quietly, staring into the flames. Thomas swallowed, feeling the weight of those words settle into his chest. Where I come from, he replied, it's supposed to be love first. She looked at him then, truly looked at him, not as a stranger or a law-bound promise, but as a man caught between two worlds. Then, she said softly, we must decide which world we are willing to endure. The fire cracked and shifted, sending sparks into the dark. Thomas knew in that moment that whatever choice awaited them would demand more than kindness. It would demand courage neither of them yet knew they possessed. The danger came faster than either of them had expected. Thomas had barely settled into his routine on the ranch when a gang of outlaws appeared on the horizon, dust rising behind their horses like a storm. They had heard whispers of a lone rancher harboring an Apache widow, and to them that meant easy prey. But what they found instead was a partnership forged in necessity, and a woman whose knowledge of the land surpassed anything they could anticipate. Nalin sensed them before Thomas did, her sharp eyes catching the glint of metal in the distance, the slight shift in the wind. She moved with quiet authority, directing Thomas to higher ground, pointing out cover, and signaling when to stay still and when to act. His heart pounded in his chest, but for the first time, he realized the weight of the bond between them. This was no longer a matter of law or obligation. This was survival, and they had no choice but to depend on one another completely. The outlaws charged, shouting and firing, but Nalin was ready. She guided Thomas's aim, her calm voice cutting through the chaos. They fought side by side, every instinct honed by necessity. When the dust finally settled, the outlaws lay beaten or fleeing, leaving only silence and the acrid smell of gunpowder behind. Thomas was injured, a graze across his shoulder, but it was minor compared to what could have happened. Nalin tended to him without hesitation, her hand steady and her presence unwavering. During the night, as Thomas rested by the fire, he watched her. She moved quietly, cleaning and bandaging the small wound, her focus entirely on the task. And in that quiet, Thomas felt a shift in their relationship. The law had bound them together, yes, but this mutual care and reliance was different. This was choice. He no longer felt trapped. He felt present, connected. When the Apache elders arrived days later, expecting to enforce the bond, they were met with a decision Thomas had already made. He acknowledged their law, honoring it as tradition, but he spoke his own truth. I will not claim her because I am bound, he said. I will claim her only if she chooses me. Nalin stepped forward, her eyes meeting his with a warmth that had been absent before. You gave me more than a ride, she said softly. You gave me a future I can choose. The elders nodded, satisfied. The law had been upheld, yet the choice had been theirs alone. In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the West, two lives once tethered by duty now stood side by side because they wanted to, because they had survived together, and because they had chosen one another against the odds of law, desert and violence.